Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to GMIC and Chairman Joe. I am very, very proud to be addressing this extremely important conference, which is truly global, hearing outlooks from China, from London, from Silicon Valley, and of course, here from Israel. And I'm happy to be addressing the topic of the investment mindset during COVID-19. My name is John Medved. I am the CEO and founder of OurCrowd. We are Israel's most active venture investor, according to PitchBook, and I'm delighted to be with you here today. In terms of what we usually start out with first is a disclaimer that we will be using forward-looking statements, and past performance is not indicative of future results. We are living now in a world pandemic, which we're all aware of. As you can see by this chart, Israel has really gone through a very interesting phenomena, which is that we beat the pandemic initially, but then we have entered a second wave. And you can see that back, in March, we were initially infected, got it almost completely under control at the end of May, down to about 5 cases a day. And then it's come roaring back where we are struggling to get it under control again. In fact, you can see that in 2 months, we went from no death cases today. We're at almost 2,000 cases every day, and sometimes as many as 10 deaths a day. So you have to be very careful with this pandemic. It turns out that many startup companies are looking at a pandemic pivot, i.e., how do you make your company relevant in this time of pandemic? We know that there are, for example, really going to be, strong long-term political and economic upheaval that, according to Henry Kissinger, could last for generations, whereas the health aspects will get under control, God willing. Whether it's in a year or 2 years, this will become a health problem which is manageable, God willing. But the change in what has happened economically is going to be profound. And this has not been our first pandemic, right? In other words, clearly you can go back into, more distant past, the Black Plague and things like that. But even in the last 100 years, there have been literally dozens of pandemics. These are some of them. And we should expect that pandemics will actually increase. And the reason that we should be ready for these kinds of pandemics is, of course, the notion that the world today is so completely interconnected. I mean, look what we're doing now. We're doing a virtual connection around the world on Zoom in all of these major cities. But once we go back to the normal travel, you can see that we interact with each other, in an incredible way. And that's why pandemics are such a threat to human civilization. What this requires from companies is a need for speed. In other words, one of the things which is so interesting in this pandemic from a business standpoint has been that things have speeded up, and that big companies and small companies alike are making changes and pivoting and transforming themselves at unheard of speed. It was Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft, back in April, said that Microsoft had gone through 2 years of digital transformation in just 2 months. And we are all now changing. This is a study that McKinsey just did, talking about how big companies are launching new projects in a matter of days. When things used to take a half a year or a year, today's speed is critical. And we all know that this has been true, especially in the startup world. Startups always need to act with great speed. George Patton, a famous general, said it that a good plan, even violently executed now, is better than a perfect plan next week. Meaning, get it done now. And Dave Gerard, who was a major person at Google, said speed is a habit. And all else being equal, the fastest company in any market will win. Speed is a defining characteristic. Now, we all know that there are public pandemic plays, right? There are companies that have been really aided and abetted and helped by the pandemic. All you have to do is look at Amazon or Zoom or companies like Netflix, totally transformed. Stocks are roaring because the change into this new normal has been profound, right? The world has changed. And the digital transformation, those companies who are changing with the world or enabling this change, whether it is work from home or distance learning or e-commerce or telemedicine or entertainment by the internet, these things are changing. Even though they existed years ago, they have accelerated beyond belief in the last couple of months and weeks, and their stock prices reflect this change. Now, the question is, if you're a private investor, what are the private pandemic plays? And the beauty now is that as investors, we have the ability to do two things which really have never been together combined. On the one hand, when you are presented with a market downturn, when assets are on sale, when prices are down, that's always been a good entry point. So if you look at the private market back in the year 2000 or 2008 and 2009, those were great entry points, right? Prices at venture capital deals were down 30, 40, 50%. Always good to buy, especially in venture capital when the asset is low, because you're going to hold it not for months, but you're going to hold it for a long time. But this time we also have a special, if you will, benefit for investing during this pandemic, which is because of this digital transformation, we are seeing trends emerge that are only going to get bigger. So if you're investing now in these private companies who are doing robotic process automation or enabling e-commerce or more cloud infrastructure, there is no question that the pandemic has given them tremendous tailwinds. They are being pushed forward by the winds of the pandemic. So you get the benefit of lower prices in general, as well as a hockey stick with this new normal. Now, you don't have to look far to see how absolutely profound the change is, right? Back months ago already, Twitter and Facebook said to their workers, stay home. And when you realize what's going on in the commercial real estate arena, said to their workers, stay home. And when you realize what's going on in the commercial real estate arena, where offices are staying closed, it's actually going to be good for many businesses because they're going to save money on their offices. We don't know exactly what the outcome is going to be in terms of performance and in terms of the company cultures when we don't have that water cooler and that interaction. But the ability for these companies to operate from afar at distance, this is not going to change, right? We are not going back ever to a situation of status quo ante, what was the reality before the pandemic. The changes that have happened are changes that are going to be permanent. And when digital companies grab land, take market share, begin to create this new reality, they never give it back. The companies that have been hurt badly in retail or in travel or hospitality or real estate, they are going to struggle to get back, if at all, to that prior condition. And my conviction is that we are not going back to the old normal ever. We are simply moving forward with the new normal. And the companies that are enabling that new normal are the ones that you want to bet on as an investor. Now, we all worry about what the recovery scenarios look like. And there have been long debates about whether or not it will be a V recovery, which is a very severe drop followed by a very, very steep recovery. In fact, the stock markets are looking more like a V. U, of course, takes some time for it to come back. W means there's rocky sections in the middle. And of course, the dreaded L means that you really never come back, not for a long time. Now, I'm a believer in what I call the Y-shaped recovery, which if you want to see the Y, you've got to turn your head on the side, and you'll see basically that a Y-shaped recovery is a V on top of a U, which is a two-tiered recovery, meaning that the tech economy, the digital economy, is absolutely happening in a V format. That V format is happening, and big time. But a lot of the traditional economy, those areas that I suggested which are challenged, like travel, like hospitality, like real estate, they are more into a U. So you're really seeing a two-tier kind of format. And you can see it when you plot stock prices of FANG, which of course is Facebook, Apple, and Amazon, Netflix, Google, against the S&P. Even though the S&P has done much better lately, this is an old slide from May, you'll see that it looks like a Y to a certain degree. Now, if you're looking for a country that is well positioned to handle this recovery and to pivot into the pandemic, to make sure that we are enabling the new normal, look no farther than Israel. Because as we all know, Israel today is really one of the leading countries of the world in terms of innovation. In the old days, I would have to use slides that came from the Israeli government or the embassy that was talking about how good we are. Today, I don't need to use those slides because the World Economic Forum does the work for us. They've named Israel either number one or number two in many criteria, whether it's growth of innovative companies or entrepreneurial culture or companies that are embracing disruptive ideas. Very, very important things are going on in Israel. And in particular, you might have noticed that just a couple of days ago, we signed a historic peace agreement with the United Arab Emirates, the third such agreement Israel has ever made with its Arab neighbors. And this is going to unleash even more investment and more activity for the Israeli tech ecosystem. Because when you combine Israel's exciting companies in fintech, in smart cities, transportation, clean energy, agriculture, medical devices, the cloud, together with the tremendous investment capability of the UAE and the other Gulf countries, this is going to be very exciting. So I think that Israel actually is going to go through a even stronger period of growth. By the way, the numbers in terms of investment so far this year are up. Believe it or not, in the middle of the pandemic, Israel has already had $6 billion invested in its startup activity over the first 7 months of the year. And this compares with $8.2 billion invested all of last year. So right now we're really running on, looks like about a $10 billion run rate, which will be up about 20 or 25% in a year of pandemic. And that really indicates how strong and how resilient the Israeli ecosystem is in the era of the pandemic. Now, if you look at what's going on in Israel, there are all kinds of exciting companies that are developing new therapeutics, dozens of them. Here's just an example. There are new companies doing testing, lots of rapid testing with saliva, with breath, with voice sounds, with using terahertz spectroscopy, rather wild stuff, but real changes in the world of testing. In the area of ventilators, even though some of them look a little weird and like spacemen, like that middle picture, there have been tremendous innovation. And also, of course, in the area of vaccine. Israel has 7 different projects working hard on providing a solution for the world via a vaccine for this terrible virus. Now, if you look at what we're doing, at OurCrowd, as an investor, we have launched a pandemic innovation fund, which is a new $100 million project where we'll be investing in a variety of companies across many different areas. And we look at the investment areas in prevention and containment, meaning how can you do early detection, use sensors, vaccines, obviously, data modeling, prediction, and of course, tracking, things that are essentially preventing infection, personal protective equipment. This is a very important area. On top of that, you have treatment and healing, therapeutics and diagnostics and robotics, and of course, telemedicine, which is becoming incredible in this middle of the pandemic. And then, of course, you have investments in the new normal, which is about business continuity, or call it even life continuity and mitigation, how to prevent disruption as a result of this pandemic. And that could be everything from virtual distance-based services, remote learning, remote work, food security, which is becoming very important, logistics, transportation, e-commerce, and whatnot. Now, if you look at how OurCrowd is doing, we're a very large platform globally. We have offices all over the world, including in Hong Kong and Singapore, as well as Australia, Latin America, Europe, and all over North America, in addition to our home base and headquarters here in Israel. We are actually managing about $1.5 billion of commitments in dollar terms. We have now actually 220 direct portfolio investments, and we invest in funds, lots of exits, and a lot of accredited investors who are our members all over the world. What makes OurCrowd exciting for our investors is the ability they have to choose their own companies. You literally can choose a single company venture capital fund. Any of the companies that you see here on our presentation, you can later go to the OurCrowd site at OurCrowd.com, and you can then join a single company venture capital fund, which we manage, which we put our own capital in, and we sit on boards where we can, and we work on it. These companies are spread over a wide variety of portfolio areas that include, of course, healthcare, and we'll talk and feature several of these healthcare companies in just a few seconds, but also semiconductors and optics, ag tech, fintech, cybersecurity, of course, very strong in Israel, enterprise software, mobility, energy, even cannabis. So if you look at OurCrowd, it's more like a marketplace where we as venture capital stewards are tracking, curating, organizing the investment, but then bringing today almost 50,000 investors from all over the world who can write a minimum check of $10,000 or even $10 million, depending upon your appetite and your capability, where you can invest in a single company. But in addition to that, you can also invest in funds. And we have 22 different funds, which you see on the right side of the screen, and these include our new Pandemic Innovation Fund, which will be investing in companies that are both in the platform already, as well as future companies. Now, in addition to that, we actually operate 5 incubators, 4 here in Israel, 1 in New Zealand, soon other incubators around the world, where we're doing venture creation at the earliest stage. Now, we're very proud of the fact that OurCrowd has had a lot of exits in terms of its ability to take investments and realize them. These are just some of them, of our 40 exits so far. The last 2 years, we've been involved in 2 really great IPOs in the U.S. Just recently, a company called Lemonade, which is a world leader in insurance, went public with the best debut of 2020. And last year, we were involved in the IPO of Beyond Meat, which, of course, was the best IPO of 2019. So we're very proud of that. But in addition to that, you see a lot of companies that we've either sold or taken public that are being bought by some of the leading companies in the world. Here's a slide about that Lemonade IPO, which we were very, very proud of just recently. Now, here's this part of the team of our pandemic fund. Again, this $100 million fund, which we're investing in. And what's cool about this fund is that it is going to invest in a combination of both medical as well as non-medical companies. So it is both focused on immediate companies that are solving the pandemic directly, but also companies who are benefiting from that new normal. And we'll talk about both of these examples in a second. And many of them are later stage companies already with lots of revenues and growing and lots of investment. And some of them are very early stage. So it's a combination of really a very diversified portfolio, medical, non-medical, early stage, later stage. We would be delighted if anyone wants to reach out to me at john@OurCrowd.com. That's JON@OurCrowd, or to our website to get more information about this Pandemic Innovation Fund. Now, during the crisis, many of our companies are having tremendous news and impact. We're having conferences. For example, our Pandemic Innovation Conference, which we did online, attracted many thousands of people to watch and to interact with many of our companies. Our companies are raising money at really large amounts during the pandemic. And whether it's companies like BioCatch, who are doing behavioral biometric authentication, they raised almost $150 million, led by Bain. Halo, who's doing AI accelerated chips, raised $60 million, et cetera, et cetera. And our telehealth leader, TytoCare, had raised $50 million, led by Insight. Many of our companies are on the front lines of the pandemic fight. So you might have seen on the front page of the New York Times, for the first time ever, 3D images of lungs that are being attacked by COVID. That was provided by our company, Surgical Theater. Or you would see the fact that Nobel laureates are working with our company in Canada called Sanitize, which we'll talk about in a second, who are literally making a sort of hand sanitizer for the nose to kill the virus in your nasal cavity. And then tons of other headlines about companies doing robots or cybersecurity or remote service technology. And there's too much here to cover. So if you'd like a copy of these slides, I'd be happy to share them with you at JON@OurCrowd.com. Please feel free to reach out to us. So I want to now spend the few minutes we have left talking about some of these companies which we've invested in and why we're so excited about them. So first and foremost is our vaccine company called Medved. The New York Times covered our $12 million investment round. This is a company who had actually been developing a vaccine for another coronavirus that affects chickens. Turns out that the avian flu, it's actually an avian bronchitis, was attacked by this company who for 4 years developed a very effective vaccine which works, except for chickens. So now 5 months ago, they switched gears and they began to take their bioinformatic tools and to redesign the vaccine to handle the new coronavirus threat for humans. We're now in beginnings of animal trials. The results are looking very, very promising. And what makes this vaccine so exciting is it's oral. It's something you take in the mouth, no injection required, and we think that it's going to be very, very exciting, just like polio. The first vaccine was an injection. Later on, it became oral. We're very hopeful for the Medved story. Another company we have is called Sight Diagnostics, which is a company which takes 2 drops of blood from a finger prick, 2 drops, and within 10 minutes gives you a complete blood count. Now, this is a huge market, big change in the world, using artificial intelligence and advanced optics. This is not about flow cytometry. It's actually optically doing a complete blood count. They take gigabytes of images for each test. It's really quite a remarkable technology. They just announced a $71 million round with some of the leading investors in the world where we participated again with another $10 million ourselves. We mentioned the company Sanotize, which is that company that allows you to spray a nitric oxide mix into your nose and to kill the virus. Nitric oxide is perfectly safe organic compound that has been found to kill 99.9% of virus in the lab tests. We're now involved in human clinical trials with medical personnel. I'm using this thing quite regularly. If I'm ever outside in any way feeling potentially affected, I then go home, I spray, and it seems to be working wonderfully for me. We're excited about that company, Sanotize. TytoCare is a company involved in telemedicine. They have a unique remote guided technology which allows the mother or the patient to get high quality images and send them in real time to their doctor. So you can see what's going on in your ears, throat, nose, get lung sounds as well as heart rate. And this is a spectacular platform that has now been working to treat remote COVID patients. And Insight just led a $50 million investment round for TytoCare. Surgical theater, we mentioned, these are guys who come from the flight simulation world of the Israeli Air Force, where they developed a way to visualize both brain, spine, now lungs, and are being used by surgeons to plan their surgery as well as to educate their patients, and even in the operating room to give you essentially a plan B in real time. Zebra Medical is a company using artificial intelligence to help interpret radiological images. And they can do this for COVID, but they also have 6 approvals from the FDA, most recently for mammography. Intuition Robotics makes the most intelligent robot that allows 90-year-olds to speak to it, and it understands and talks back to them, helps them to take their temperature, keeps them in touch. Great, interesting company. Barcode Diagnostics is improving the ability of PCR testing to test more efficiently by 100-fold. Pulm One is doing lung function testing. So many people are going to have impaired lung function as a result of the COVID crisis, but we don't have tools to measure this. Pulm One is one of them. Spectacular company. Cryon doing robotic process automation, which is letting the bots do the coding, helping big health organizations tie new COVID data to their core systems. Switch is a disease management platform that has been used for cancer and for diabetes, now being used for COVID. Texi allows customers to get remote service at home from a technician over their cell phone. So important during COVID when you can't come into the house. And this was just recently used in the lockdown in New York by Verizon. Cyber MDX, helping individuals and corporations protect their medical devices so a hacker cannot take control of your pacemaker or your infusion pump and send you a ransom demand. Chemtai, providing you with a real-time AI exercise coach at home. And there are more than I can even spend time here talking about. But I would like to sum up and say that we are extremely grateful to have had the opportunity today to present to the GMIC. We love this conference. We hope that it'll be back with a in-person conference where we can see you, give you hugs, shake your hands, that we will be able to return to the normal kind of commerce which we do. In the meantime, we will continue to be active on the virtual channel, talking to you over Zoom. Please go to our website, www.OurCrowd.com, for further information about the Pandemic Innovation Fund and any of these individual companies. And any of you who would like to reach out to me personally, send me an email to John, Jon, at OurCrowd.com. It was wonderful speaking to you, and I wish that all of you and your families are healthy and prosperous and figure out a way, together with us and other partners, to survive and thrive during this pandemic. Thank you very much.